Well, hey, here we go. So good morning, and thanks for joining us for the June edition of Money Talks. I'm Mike Berry, Executive Director of WASBO, and this is the last Friday of June already. End of the year is almost upon us. I guess Monday, right? June 30th. So we got a lot to catch up on. And since we're talking state budget, it could like change while we're doing this webinar this morning. So just be aware of the fact that the situation is changing quickly. Really, our goal this morning is to bring everyone up to date as best we can. So there's a lot of information to put across, which means this Money Talks is going to be a good one for a change, finally, right? So let's dive in. I'll start by introducing um, Brian Adesso from Menasha, the garden spot of the Fox Valley. Hey, Brian, how you doing?
Mike, good. How are you?
Good, good. And also Andy, the current WASBO Board Treasurer, Andy from Oregon. How you doing, Andy?
Great, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yeah. Excited to get all this information out this morning. And to help us do that, our special guest this morning is our very own research director, Ann Chapman. Good morning, Ann.
Morning, everybody.
So, Ann, thank you for following all this so carefully. Um, it's a lot to keep track of, especially if you're trying to run a business office and deal with everything else, involved in day-to-day operations of a school district. So maybe we can help folks out here today. So if you stick with us for about 45 or 50 minutes, hopefully you'll know as much as anybody else does about the situation or with school finance. So you guys ready to dive in? All right, well, let's do it. So yeah, this is our end of the year fearless financial forecast. The typical disclaimers, basically, we don't want to go to jail. So we are not attorneys giving out legal advice. We're not lobbying here today, and we don't do anything with partisan politics. We don't endorse particular politicians or parties. We're just here to talk about what's good for K-12 funding. Okay, so there, get that on tape, Ryan. All right, and that's all part of our mission. So I appreciate those of you WASPO members who begin each day by reciting the WASPO mission, and as of course I do. But right in the middle of it is we advocate for funding, and that's what we're all about. So there's everybody. Um, so yeah, we've already introduced everybody. So all right, there we go. So I guess every month we have a cartoon. Every month it's along these lines, isn't it? It's like So it's kind of funny that there's so many budget cartoons that are all sort of depressing. There's never like, yay, it's a budget meeting, right? So hey, if you get out of this budget only needing aspirin, I'll consider that a big win, right? You might need something stronger by the time we're through with this. All right, let's get started with just where are we in the budget process? So, because I'm getting confused myself, and it doesn't seem like they do the same thing twice ever. Every 2 years it's a different path. So. I was keeping track with the governor's budget proposal, and then we had the finance hearings around the state. And then, Ann, why don't you take it from there? We can't hear you.
When will I learn? When will we learn?
Yes, thank you,
Um,
Ann. Okay,
so
let's start again.
yeah. So the governor's budget proposal came out in February. And at some point after that, the joint finance started, had their public hearings around the state. And that's where we heard an incredibly galvanized K-12 community articulating what our priorities are. Number one, primary special education up to 60% or more, and inflationary, revenue authority. We're sort of clear uh, themes that came out all over the place. K-12 district people and other kinds of stakeholders and advocates it was all over the place. Very well understood. Joint Finance Committee has had, I mean, maybe three meetings, executive sessions since then, and one of which covered public instruction. We're going to talk a little bit about what came out of that motion, and they're meeting again today to what we're told is wrap up all their work and move it on to the Assembly and the Senate. So we'll see what happens today. There's a heck of a lot left for them to do, including what I would imagine would be some adjustments and changes to what they did for public instruction, because we'll talk about what came out of that, which won't work for the governor. And so potentially things might wrap up today for joint finance. Whenever it wraps up for joint finance, they will send what they pass onto the Assembly and the Senate, which will then work with it. And if they have different versions, they'll have to reconcile and work that out. And then they'll send it to the governor. And then the governor will have options. He can either sign it, completely veto it, or do some combination of partial vetoes that we've seen him do in the past.
Okay. Well, the joint finance work that's been done so far has been pretty hostile, I would say, to K-12 interests generally. So, but I guess it's not over, right? And there's still a
No,
long way to
no, it
go.
is so not over. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that there's a risk in joint finance staking out a position that was so conservative, they're almost giving the governor no choice but to push back hard. So hopefully there's some kind of a move to the middle here, and we can get something that's a little more reasonable for everybody. I guess that's part of the dark art of legislative work. I don't know quite how that works, but it's possible this will come together. We'll see. But
It's
what do you
interesting
guys?
that it's interesting, Mike, that the joint finance keeps talking about the 325, so you got your money, but that doesn't seem to be resonating with people of Wisconsin. I think because we've done such a good job of focusing on special ed. Because I mean, we all know the funding formula is like super easy. You can fill it out with a crayon and it's all done. So I mean, I think we strategically did the right thing in picking special ed, knowing or not knowing that joint finance is just going to focus on that 325 and say you're done because you have this for the next 400 years. And it doesn't seem to be working for joint finance, and it seems to be working well for us.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's been weird to follow that $325 issue on the low revenue ceiling. At first, there were a lot of folks who were upset with the governor, mostly for the way that it happened, with the partial veto. So they were really upset with him. Then during the Joint Finance Committee meetings, they were kind of taking a deep bow and saying, "You guys have got $325 per pupil. You are well set. So good for you." And then as soon as they were done with that, then there's like a windsock. Then they switched to, how can the governor allow this increased school spending? Because it's all going to, how do I say this? They were blaming the governor for the inevitable tax increases that are going to result from increasing the per pupil amount. It's like, which way do you want it? They kept going back and forth on it. But we'll see what happens. We are going to cover a lot of what's current and where we think it might go. The next four slides are pretty intense to look at. But Anne, if you could walk us through the basics, then we'll
Yeah.
we'll let Andy and Brian take it from there. So let's start with the key funding items per the Joint Finance Committee.
Yeah, so like we always talk about, the backbone of school finances revenue limits. So uh in terms of the revenue limit, there was no change in current law. So because the partial veto was upheld, current law is now school districts will get a $325 increase per pupil adjustment increase upward every year for as far as we can tell until that changes in legislation. And so that's going to happen no matter what. Even if the budget is delayed, that will happen. If the budget is not delayed and they don't make any changes to what they passed in the joint finance on public instruction, it will also be 325. They didn't change it. They didn't do anything to it. What they did also not do is they put zero increase in the equalization aid, which zero. So in other words, that entire 325, unless something changes, will fall on the property tax. That is unprecedented. There has never been a budget as far as we've looked back to the 70s. We've never seen a budget where 2 years in a row there was either zero or an increase, or a zero or a decrease in equalization aid. So I can't imagine that's going to stick, but we'll see. The other thing that they also didn't do is put anything in school levy tax credits. Now, we don't like using school levy tax credits as a way to provide property tax relief, but they didn't do that either. So that's going to be interesting to watch what they end up doing about that, if anything. The other thing they also have not done as of yet is increase the low revenue ceiling. So they took a big jump up in the last state budget, but we haven't seen any change there, and they didn't change per pupil categorical aid. So
Yeah.
just to wrap that up, all we're seeing is what we already knew, 325. It's all going to fall on the property tax at this point. So the implications of that is that Revenue Limit Authority is going to continue to stay below inflation. This will be the 17th and 18th consecutive years of below inflation revenue of authority for districts. It'll all be on the property taxpayer. And, what we keep hearing people are worried about is all these referendums. Well, none of this is going to change the need for districts to continue to go to operating referendum.
Right. So, Ann, let me ask you one question and we'll turn over to Brian and Andy. So, other than the low revenue ceiling eligible districts themselves, who else is a big fan of increasing the low revenue ceiling? What other interest group is really interested in that issue?
Oh, the Association for Equity and Funding, is that
Yeah, and
what you mean?
basically the voucher movement generally
Oh, the
speaking,
voucher
right?
movement. Yes. Yes. So, right. So, I mean, we can get
Yeah,
into that, but
we will.
low revenue ceiling has a sort of a special impact. Of course, it helps low revenue districts, but the the sort of the main group that benefits from a low revenue ceiling increase, kind of ironically, is voucher and charter schools, because they get the full increase that's put into statute, every single one of them for every single kid.
It's like a
Whereas
Me Too, right? Like a
school
Me Too
districts,
clause. Like they
well,
get
it's
what
not
we
even
get,
me too. They get way more than school districts do, because for the most part, most school districts won't benefit from the low
right?
revenue ceiling at all. Some of them will benefit a little bit, maybe by $1, because
Right.
they're so close. And some of them will get the whole amount, but very few. And actually, in this budget, because the low revenue ceiling was set at 11,000, almost every district is above that now, because they should be at 11,325 at this point. So basically no district would get, if they move it beyond, if they move it, whatever, no district will get the same amount that a charter or voucher school would get, if that makes sense.
So if you're wondering why the low revenue ceiling is suddenly faring so well in the legislature in terms of its popularity, it's because all the voucher advocates are cheering it on. They actually do better under a low revenue ceiling than most of the school districts do.
But we
So
have we have school districts and school district interest groups, the Association for Equity and Funding, also pushing it really hard as well.
yes, we do. Yeah, they're a small group, but they do advocate. Okay, so I want to jump ahead out of order here, and because we brought up the revenue limit
Definitely.
and
Can I say,
we brought
yeah,
up
can I say,
equalization aid. Brian, Andy, you guys are going to have a July 1 aid estimate come out next week. What, Tuesday? And based on this screen, that it's probably going to not be very accurate. What are you guys going to do with it? What do you recommend districts do with it?
I'd say caution everybody about putting any stock in it, right? Because it's based on budget information. We're still not sure what's going on with a large school district in Wisconsin. That could still impact things a little bit. as well as we don't even have a state budget. So what DPI is putting in there from a allocation will have impact in how this all works out.
Yeah, I'd be kind of ready for that increase. Trying to figure out if you want to keep things flat on how that would work. But I think that they purposely lined everything up like this because, to our credit, we've been saying spendable funds, spendable funds. Now they give us 100% spendable funds and no non-spendable funds. Now superintendents are starting to say, well, we need some non-spendable money. And now it gets really confusing because what do you want? Like, you said spendable, we gave you all spendable. Now you're saying you want non-spendable. And I get it's a mix. I mean, that could also have a huge impact if they would do something in this last bill with low revenue and push it up $1,000 or $1,500, and there's no equalization aid. That would probably get rid of referendums for the majority of districts just based on the huge tax increase if they end up taking it all. So I think just make sure to look at your models and understand how those increases are going to impact the taxpayers.
Yeah. So I guess we'll emphasize again, this is not over with, but as it stands now, yeah, big implications for the tax levy. And this whole thing has always been a state and local partnership for funding. And as Ann said, 2 years of the state saying, well, our side of the partnership is that we're not funding anything. You're going to get some really wacky results. So hopefully they'll come to their senses. And that would be good for us, but it'd be especially good for taxpayers. Okay, so that's where we are on the big funding item of revenue limit and equalization aid. But there's a lot more. So our lead item was special ed. Ann, what can you tell us about this?
Okay. So special ed, they did put some increased resources into special ed. They put an amount that would reach an estimated 35% reimbursement in 25-26 and 37.5% in 26-27. Stays at some certain. So to remind everybody what we asked for and what everybody was united in communicating is we needed 60% sum sufficient. So this falls way short of that. And as we all know, these estimated some certain appropriations never reach the estimated level. So you could take 2 or 3 percentage points off of that at least. And that's probably where we would land if you look at historically. So that was very disappointing to see, similar to what we saw the last state budget, just sort of like inching up a situation that is pretty unsustainable. And then what they did do is almost like nobody was asking for this, but they went ahead and got real aggressive with high cost special education aid. They gave more than the governor asked for on this one. They moved high cost special education aid reimbursement up to an estimated 50% in the first year and 90% in the second year. 90% is where in statute it says that it's sort of the ceiling right now in statute that you can get up to 90% in special ed, high cost special ed, and I don't know that it's ever gotten to that point, at least not in recent years. So that is a great way for them to take a victory run and say, look what we did. Just like amazing support for special education, 90% high cost. And high cost is what really, I heard, if it was Mark Line, somebody said high cost is what really maybe it was Voss, really bankrupts a lot of districts. If they get 1 or 2 kids, and that may be the case for some districts. But high cost special education, just to put some perspective on it, high cost special education aid benefits 3% of students with disabilities across the state, 0.5% of students statewide. Compare that to primary special ed, which supports almost 16% of students statewide. And if you invested in primary special education, like substantially like was asked for, that would help with high cost special ed. Because remember, with high cost special ed, districts have to still come up with the first $30,000 for a child. And that has to be covered in some way, whether with primary special ed aid or federal aid or from a Fund 1027 transfer. So high cost doesn't really help the problems. Primary special ed would really help the problem, both for high cost and not high cost. But that's where we are with it.
Okay, thanks. And yeah, I appreciate you pointing out that the 35 and 37 and a half figures are likely overstated. I'm also experiencing this is something that I don't know if anybody else suffers from this, but I only spot my typos once I'm
I know
presenting
I
them
saw.
to a large group. I could have looked at this 20 more times and not spotted the error in the fourth bullet where it says 206-27. There's something like the typos only jump out at you when you're presenting it to others. So apologize for the typo. And yeah, the high cost special ed is just a distraction. It's a little political gamesmanship. I mean, there's some value in it, but it's like we're not going to give you what you want, but we'll give you something that sort of sounds like we care at a hugely discounted price, right? In
And
terms
it's
of state
and it
budget.
confuses people. It makes our messaging that much harder.
Yeah, it's kind of political gamesmanship, like a political fig leaf to cover up what they're really doing, which is ignoring special ed categorical aid yet again with these sort of, these very minimal increases. I was talking to an old former business manager, retired, who was recalling when 70% reimbursement, the actual percentage, 70% itself was written in a state law. And then,
Oh, I didn't know
and
that.
that, yeah, yeah. I mean, not a sum sufficient, just literally the percentage was written in the law, 70%. And then, of course, it's deteriorated for a long time. And under Scott Walker's governorship there, in that era generally, it wasn't just Governor Walker, but the bucket of money for special ed categorical didn't increase like a dime over like a decade. It was just sat there. So we've got a lot of work to do. I'm really glad that, like Brian said, this is our number one priority. It is not too late to send one more email to your lawmaker, and it doesn't have to be some fancy lobbying thing. Just send an email. Say, hey, don't forget, before you wrap this up, this is our top priority. So we'll see. We're still holding out hope that special ed categorical gets addressed in this budget. Okay, let's move on.
Nick, I just want to say
Whoop.
lots of
Sorry,
words on
Brian. I
this.
didn't
No,
go
lots of
ahead,
words
Brian. I
on
didn't
this
mean to do
screen.
that.
Lots of words on this screen on the special ed one. The most important thing is it's not going to be 35 and 37.5%. When
Right.
you forecast 2 or 3% less than that. If you take
Yes,
nothing else from this screen, take that. Because I think a lot of us were caught off guard this last time by over budgeting. So make sure you take off 2 to 3% because we know that the Legislative Fiscal Bureau has already calculated it differently than what DPI is showing. So make sure you take 2 to 3% off of whatever they settle on.
that's right. Otherwise, you're going to unbalance your whole budget, right? You're going to have to increase your interfund transfer. It's going to screw up your 10 fund. So, yeah, best to be really careful. No matter what the final numbers are, they should be discounted by a couple of percents. Okay, let's move on to other things that impact your upcoming budget. Anne?
Yeah, so there's a number of other things, but we're just going to cover a couple of extra things for inquiring minds. They did not increase the statutory base payment level for voucher and charter schools, but they did increase but the payments to voucher and charter schools will go up because they're indexed to increases for public schools. So they're indexed to increases in revenue limit and categorical aids and low revenue ceiling. So because of the increase in the revenue limit and some of the categorical aids that they provided, there's what came out of joint finance is an estimated increase for all voucher schools and charter schools, independent charter schools of $449 in 25-26 and $447 in 26-27. This will also apply to open enrollment transfer amounts. So the open enrollment transfer amount did get bump up in its base amount
Big bump.
by 1578. So open enrollment transfer is going to go up from on the base level from 8962 in the current year to 10,540 in 25-26. So that 10,540 but it'll be higher than that because open enrollment transfer also gets the same benefiting mechanism or indexing mechanism as voucher and charter schools. So they'll also get 449 and 447 in the first and second years. So the estimate right now is that open enrollment transfer will go up to 10,989 in 25-26 and 11,436 in 26-27. So that could be quite a great thing for districts that have open enrollment transfer in. But for those that are netting out for open enrollment, this could be huge. In fact, some districts' own revenue limit might be below that 11,436. I don't know. I'm not sure actually if that would work out.
Yeah.
Everybody should be up to maybe 11,650. But anyway, it'll be a huge chunk of what they get for their own students. It could be a big deal. And then for anyone who's been sort of watching whether we're going to see a decoupling bill, in other words, like moving everything that, all of the costs for voucher and charter schools from a local state mix all the to be 100% covered by GPR, state GPR. We have reason to believe that there won't be a decoupling provision in the state budget. We've had the sponsors of a bill that's kind of a draft of a bill that's in circulation right now. They have said we're not going to push to have this in the budget. We're going to push this as a separate standalone bill. That does not guarantee anything, but at least it's a little bit more of an indicator than we had a couple weeks ago even. So those are some sort of open enrollment and voucher charter type issues that came out of the process.
Wow. So Brian, you are open enrollment net in or net out?
This will add to our expenses.
Sorry, I think maybe I broke up there. When I was doing this, it seemed like the risk on open enrollment was because I was open enrollment negative in Madison. Most of the big urbans are negative, right? Because the suburban districts like Andy over there would just pick off all of our students. And so there were two risks involved. And I was usually focused on the first risk, which was just getting the count right. Making sure I increased my assumption of the number of kids out every year. Because it was easy to talk yourself into not facing that reality. Like saying, well, maybe it'll just be another 20. Well, in reality, it was going to be another 120. So just getting the N right, the number right, was the first challenge. But I don't know how many business managers or budget builders out there this spring were counting on an extra, what, $1,500 per kid? If you've got 100 kids out, net, that's more than $100,000, right? I mean, that is just a huge dollar amount. So if nothing else today, we really want to alert you to the budget busting risk associated with these numbers for the open enrollment out districts. Andy, you're in, right?
Yeah, we are in, but I think actually Ann just said that the number's closer to $2,000, or that's potentially what it could be, right?
The increase?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And those are big numbers. So be aware. Again, this is not final, but this is the way it's trending. It's certainly something to check into. Better to try to fix it in June, July, and August, while you still have a chance to, as opposed to like late October.
Hey, and these things are kind of baked in current law, though, right? Like
Yeah.
this isn't
No.
even. No.
No. This what we're talking about right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is the joint finance motion that was passed. So we don't know what's going to come of that.
Oh, from the open enrollment amount.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 8962 is current law. The 1578 is what was proposed in the joint finance motion.
Okay.
So that could change.
Yeah. And those are some pretty hefty increase in the voucher amounts too. Um, so that's just going to drive up your levies, right? You have to levy for it, which makes you unpopular. Um, some big numbers on the screen here on this slide. So I'm waiting for all the angry emojis to start floating across the screen here as we as we present on this issue. This is kind of a sleeper issue. It doesn't get a lot of attention, but if you're building a budget, yeah, there goes one of them. You really need to be aware. Okay, let's move on because we got a lot of other stuff to cover. So other key finance items. We talked about July 1 equalization aid. What it, you know, DPI by statute must publish it. They don't have a choice. And they recognize its limitations as well. But again, they have no choice. So they'll publish it. The key there is just make sure your superintendent and your board and maybe your local reporter understands just how many untested assumptions are built into that number. Okay, let's move on to a couple other quick ones. I'll run through a couple of these, or at least the next one. Um, the July 1 collective bargaining agreements, the maximum for the base wage increase is 2.95%. Thank you to Mr. Stellmacher and Kelly Moraine for putting that out all the time. And then Anne, you were on with us, I think, back in the fall when we first talked about this Act 12 and the personal property tax. And it came in as sort of a like out of the clear blue sky. Um, Districts were allowed to take in this revenue outside the revenue limit related to it's called Act 12 personal property taxes. And that was kind of a nice little win. But we were cautioning folks, Andy particularly was cautioning everybody that don't get too addicted to this revenue because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. And now it looks like it may move within the revenue limit. Is that,
Yeah. Yeah.
do you know anything about that?
Yeah. So 25 24, 25 was the only year, I believe, where it was
Right,
outside the revenue limit.
right.
And that was from Act 12. And what has happened is both the governor's budget and his proposal and what the Joint Finance uh, approved was to go back to the way it was before, which is to keep the personal property tax aid inside the revenue limit. So people are, who knows why, people are saying it was a drafting error, that 24-25 was a drafting error and we just sort of benefited from it for a year and they're fixing it by this motion. But well, whatever the reason, that is what's happening. They're going back to the old way, and the impact of that is that about $58 million across the state will now in levy 58 property taxes across the state will go down by 58% or 58 million, and revenue limits will also go down by that amount. So it amounts to $58 million across the state in fewer resources for schools. Of course, every district's different, but yes, that's what it appears to be. And this is one of those things where I think we can bank on that for the most part because the governor proposed it. So he's not likely to veto it. Um,
Okay. So if you're looking at your revenue budget by line item by line item for next year, hopefully you didn't just cut and paste that from last year and assume you're going to get it again. If you did, you better fix that now because it's going to go away, and likely to go away. And the distribution on that was kind of odd, across the state. Some people got a lot of money, some people got next to nothing. So I do believe it was a drafting error because it was favorable to K-12. So I figured it must have been a drafting error. I mean, they wouldn't have done that intentionally. Okay, so then 2 days ago, the Wisconsin State Supreme Court ruled, I guess we could say against Governor Evers as to early literacy bill, originally Act 20. I think the funding part was Act 100. Um, what is a lot of that? I think it was like $50 million. I don't remember that it was $50 million going directly to school districts. In fact, I
no.
think very little of it went, if any, went directly to school districts. And can you fill us in?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were different amounts that sort of added up to close to $50 million. There's some money for if you approved a curriculum that's on an approved
Okay.
list, you get partial reimbursement for that. There's also money going to hire reading tutors, like one-on-one reading coaches. There's like maybe an estimated amount of money for like 64 coaches across the state. So it's not this is not going to change anybody's financial fate.
Right.
But I guess DPI has been taking, you all may know more about this than I do in terms of the mechanics, but DPI has been going forward and taking people's claims in hopes that this money will be released. The Joint Finance Committee is meeting this morning to work out the details of how to potentially release these funds to DPI. And then it sounds like districts will apply to DPI to have certain costs reimbursed. I'm not sure how the reading coaches part works mechanically, but anyway, that's another thing that hopefully will be resolved this morning with Joint Finance Committee's proceedings.
And Andy, have either of you guys filed a claim on this yet, or do you intend to?
Yeah, absolutely. If there's an opportunity, there was something with timelines too, Anne, wasn't there, that people were a little worried about that or not? Or
Yeah, supposedly the claim window's closed, but DPI, I saw a note yesterday, I believe, or they're still taking claims.
We already submitted our claim, but I don't know how it's all gonna go. I mean,
There's a website to check that I'll put in the chat here.
Okay.
we have spent a lot of money in that area, so, and I'm sure every other school district has as well. It would be nice to get a little bit of it back.
Yeah, something is better than nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It seemed like Dane County and Milwaukee, greater Milwaukee area, those districts had adopted more their early literacy seemed much more influenced by kind of whole language and Columbia Teachers College um, and they probably had the most the larger ta task to rebalance their or to change their approach to early literacy instruction. So they would likely have the bigger claims. The last bullet on this slide is that there are three bills to limit school district referenda. They're not part of state budget, but they're part of this. There's a state budget work that goes on right now, and there's a parallel regular legislative session that goes on at the same time. And anyway, these school district referenda bills are pending. Um, they're all they all come from the same place, which is um, school districts are winning too many referenda, so we have to change move the goalposts on the school districts. I'm certainly hopeful that the governor, if they make it that far, that the governor would veto them because they're just simply, in my opinion, sort of anti-democratic. Okay, so there's a lot of information on this page. Um, so yeah, be aware. Okay, and yet more uncertainty. The federal government. Okay, and you're really much more up to date on this than I think almost any of us are. So, what do you know about the federal funding situation?
To be up to date on this is
Yeah,
to be
right. I
like
get it.
I go to say I don't know what's going to happen. It's incredible how much uncertainty and sort of shifting around goes on here. There's a lot of levels to think about. The main thing I think everybody's worried about is their 25-26 federal money because that's what's coming up as early as we can. You know, you've heard about the president's skinny budget. That's for 26-27. We're still waiting on confirmation of what is supposed to happen with 25-26 funding. We were told, or it was sort of understood that some of the major areas are going to be flat funded, which is better than a cut. So Title I, IDEA, the rural education money was supposed to be flat funded. There's other areas, some Title III, in Title III too, some Title II money, some Title IV money we weren't sure, like it wasn't set it wasn't sort of set where the amount was determined, which means the governor has or the president has some discretion. But now we're finding out that there is some 25-26 money that we thought was going to be set, but it's being considered for potential future rescission, which is where the president takes basically doesn't spend money that Congress has appropriated and sort of makes a case for cutting back on funding that's already been appropriated. So that's all uncertain. We're still waiting to hear on this. There's actually an Ed Week article on it that I will send out. So anyway, 25-26 funding is probably going to be relatively flat, but there's a little bit of uncertainty around it. The reconciliation process could affect schools as well. The main ways the reconciliation process could affect schools is that it's dealing with like tax related and entitlement programs. So the way that could affect us is Medicaid is on the chopping block, which I think everybody's hearing about in the news. So that could really affect school district ability to meet the needs of students with disabilities. So we're waiting to hear on that. The other thing that's coming out of reconciliation that we're watching closely is basically a brand new national voucher program that is an incredible in its structure in the sense that it's a tax credit program that basically anybody, whether they care about private school and voucher schools or not, or choice, this is an area you can put your money and have major tax write-offs. So anybody who's in a position to try to go for tax write-offs their financial advisor would tell them to do this. So this could sort of, whether we want to expand voucher funding or not in our state or other states, if this goes forward, it's right now, I think last I saw it was going to be, I forget the amounts right now, but it would basically create a national voucher program across the country. So that's reconciliation. And then, like I said, 26-27 discretionary funding. So, title and IDA and stuff. That's being considered right now. And there's a lot more uncertainty from that perspective. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Yeah. Okay. So, Andy, Brian, what have you done with this in terms of budgeting for 25-26?
Yeah, for 25-26, we have some estimates and we've been using those from the federal government. Not anticipating any huge changes, but starting to kind of think about Medicaid funding or for the following year, and trying not to focus too much on the following year because we could have some surprises heading our way.
Right. Brian?
We're trying to increase our budget for tissues for all the tiers, and maybe some mental health help, boosting
For
up the
staff?
EAP.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
flatlining is probably the best case, but you can't just slash and burn. And,
Right.
some of it's going to be keep it flat and ride with it for a year. And I think we're all kind of in the same situation that we all know what's coming next year.
Right.
There's going to be a lot on the ballots, and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that I'm so distracted watching these emojis go floating by. Um, I think if part of this is just practical advice from folks who've done this. That it says third bullet down there, reason number 1,000 to maintain a strong general fund balance, right? I think if I'm in front of a school board, I'm going to say we don't know anything really, and nor does anybody else. So we're gonna flat fund it ourselves. In terms of our assumptions around title and IDEA. And if we're wrong, we're wrong, but we got to do something. And so as to not disturb the whole teaching operation and staffing, we're going to stay steady as you go. And if we get burned on that a little bit, well, again, that's why we have a big fund balance. It's the reason you have a fund balance, or one of the many reasons. So that's how I would approach it. And then, yeah, for 26-27, we'll just have to see. But there's no point in worrying about that right now, at least not for the next several weeks. So that's the very uncertain story on federal funding. 2 months ago, Tom McCarthy was on with us from DPI talking about this this letter that was requiring school districts to certify their compliance, proving that you at the school district level did not violate Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, et cetera, in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion. And you had 10 days to do it, and you had to certify. And that has freaked everybody out. And the penalty was you're going to lose all your federal money or something like that. Um, One of my favorite superintendents called it a ransom note. He's like, we get this ransom note saying we have to sign it and send it back or else we're going to lose our money. So no one really knew what to do. Tom McCarthy's take on it at the time was that the department was in no position to offer solid advice to individual school districts. You had to consult with your attorney and do whatever you thought was best. Well, and just to close the door on this, hopefully for a long time, that that so-called ransom letter was blocked by the courts, so you don't have to worry about it. So you can kind of put that one out of your mind, hopefully for a very long time. Okay, so that's federal. Because just a few other items that we wanted to mention this morning. So this came out yesterday in the DPI, you know, uh, blog or listserv, call it what you will, that they were required by statute to do this work. The department has launched their public platform for accessing school finance data. So I think it would be a good idea to get out there and take a good look around, give it a test drive, take it around the course a few times, and see what's there. So that the first time you see it is not from a taxpayer or a citizen or whatever. So just be aware that this is out there and make sure that you are not caught off guard um, by what's available, and it should be nothing to fear. All of our data is publicly reported anyway, so should not be a problem. But just be aware. Okay, I think we have. Whoops, sorry about that. Just a couple more slides to go. Um, Here, so I want to take a minute or two to talk about. There's a lot more going on in the state budget, right? In the business office this time of year. I used to work with our colleague Ross McPherson in Madison, and I'd go in to see him around this time of year. And his office, the computer was humming and the printer was whirring and the keyboard was clacking. It was like a busy little kitchen in there. It was like he was like a short order cook in a little diner. And he just ding, grant claims are up. It was just we used to call it Ross's busy little kitchen. It is a busy time of year. And so Brian and brought some of this up last time. I just thought maybe we put these on the screen and let you guys talk to them. Andy and Brian, how do you guys approach this work when so many people want to take vacations and so on?
We really just take it one step at a time. I mean, there's a lot of work. It's going to get done. We all have that deadline of the audit to kind of make sure everything's finalized by then. Our audit's 2 weeks into August, so we have a little bit more time for cleanup and everything. The one thing on this list is the OPEB contributions, but also remember the actuarial study that should have been started like in January or maybe before that of this year. So if you have an outdated actuarial study, you probably want to reach out quickly. They may be able to get it, or the audit will just take it a little later. The auditors will. But yeah, getting all the grant claims done, making sure everything's done, making sure what's in your books actually meet or equal what the grant claims are, because everything's being synced now. And these DPI reports, like the transportation report that snuck up on us, we have some changes in our office. So just if you didn't know, next Monday, transportation reports due. So you may want to get working on that.
Yeah,
And then, yeah,
go ahead.
on. No, I'm good.
I was just going to say OPEB, and then I think Fund 46, you have until the end of July to make those contributions. So just be aware of that. The main thing is getting bills paid and transactions posted and everything so that we can start running reports for the auditors here in a couple of weeks. So Yeah, just communicate amongst your staff members and make sure hopefully you have a plan in place already as to who's taking vacation when, so that you have a staff business office and keep it running.
Andy, you made a good point about, bills being paid and stuff, and like we really need to watch like what we're paying right now. Make sure you didn't pay, those annual things twice in one year. Like if you always pay them in July, pay them in July, even if you got them right now. Your auditors will make you move them. And then if you're getting stuff that hasn't even shown up or maybe showed up today, like those probably shouldn't be in this fiscal year. They should probably be in next fiscal year. So now is kind of the time that you're looking at all that stuff and analyzing it's last year, this year, and that really shouldn't be like I have this much left over in my budget, so I can just spend it. That time is that ship has sailed.
Yeah, we always say let's count utility bills, right? You got to have 12 utility bills in each fiscal year. So depending on how that breaks out and how big of a building you have, your utility budget could be over or under otherwise.
Yeah, it's busy. The last one on there is evals. If you're responsible for doing evals for people that report directly to you, those folks work hard, and regardless of their specific performance, they are, just being fair. People are entitled to feedback on their work, and if you're responsible for that, go ahead and do it. It's an important part of being a responsible supervisor. And similarly on salary adjustments, in some cases those things are tied up with board approvals and so on. But in some cases, they can be moved along, and to ignore those things and push them off is it's just, it's demotivating for staff. So to the extent that you can move those things along for people, for folks that you work with, then certainly worth the time and effort. Yeah, I hated those DPI reports that we're doing this summer. Was it census? Summer school transportation, the regular transportation report. I was always like, what? Why would they make that
Rip
do it?
off.
Like, come on, that's not fair. Not fair at all. My other favorite summer issue was that we'd have elementary schools that were essentially closed in the summer. And there's no principal, there's no assistant principal, there's no secretary, anything. And watching the piles of boxes from Amazon or whatever, UPS, just mounds of boxes stacking up in these offices. I think we might have a weak internal control here over receiving of goods. So I don't know what your process is, but don't let that happen. So that's why summer is busy. Okay, so two last things. Well, three. First, thank you. We've had a great time doing these money talks all year this year. I really want to thank Anne this morning for all of her diligent tracking of state budget activity. I want to thank all the guests we've had all year. It's been super helpful. And then assuming that the WASBO Board of Directors doesn't cancel money talks, which I suppose is a possibility, we will see you again October 22nd, or excuse me, August 22nd. We're taking August 22nd. We're taking July off to go sit on a pier somewhere. So I want to thank Andy and Brian for all their help this year. Andy and Brian, if all goes well, we'll both be back with us in August. You might remember last year, Andy held out in an ugly contract dispute with Money Talks. Hopefully we can avoid that this year. And then lastly, I just want to acknowledge that we have a number of folks retiring from WASBO this year. And we've done other things to honor folks at the spring conference, but I just want to mention their names. If you know these folks, send them an email. Thank them for all their hard work. You can imagine how many nights and weekends these folks gave up to do the work well. So among that group are Jill Collins from Black River, Jeff DeLutri from Fox Point Bayside. Jeff used to be a business manager, now he's a superintendent. He just retired. Shelley Ives from Campbell Sport. Pat Fenimore, facility director from Kenosha, used to be the WASPO board president. Phil Fry, the finance guy from Sun Prairie. Phil was also a WASPO board president. A couple of the facility folks, Mark Garsky and Jeff Knodel, from South Milwaukee and Menominee Falls, Shelley Riley from Hamilton, Kathy Stoltz from Sauk Prairie, Bill Truen, of course, from Elkhorn, and lastly, and I want to call this one out especially, Dr. Tom Owens, who's I think started his career in WASBO I'm thinking about 45 plus years ago, and he was a WASBO board president and did great work. For WASBO and for his colleagues across the state for many, many years. So happy trails to all of you who are retiring. Well deserved. So I think that's going to wrap it up today. Any closing words of wisdom from Ann, Brian, or Andy?
Just take care of yourself this summer a little bit. Try to recharge. We got a lot of fun heading our way next year.
Don't use gasoline as your charcoal starter. That's my advice for this. And Brian?
Go take one step at a time, and try to get a little bit of time off, even if it's Fridays or every other Friday or something. It's important. I know that there's a ton of work to do. It'll get done, I promise. Just take some time to recharge.
All right. Hey, thanks everybody. It was great to get this information out today. I hope it's of use to everybody who joined us. This was recorded, so if you need a copy of the slide deck, or if you want to send this to somebody else or watch it again, just go on the Money Talks part of the WASBO website. It should be posted. I think the slide deck will be posted within the hour, and then the audio or the recording will be up a little bit later after we edit out all of the inappropriate things that we said this morning. So again, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, and we'll see you next time.